Okay, for topic three, we're going to look at writing decimals as fractions. So we already know that decimals are just another way to represent part of a whole or a fractional number. Okay, so they're very similar to fractions in that regard. So it just so happens that every single fraction has a decimal equivalent. Okay, now there are decimals that do not have a fraction equivalent. So just as a really quick intro to this, we have two types of decimals. Okay, we have rational numbers and we have irrational numbers. Okay. So when it comes to rational numbers, these are numbers that can be written as fractions. Irrational numbers, on the other hand, can never be written as a fraction. So numbers that cannot be written as fractions. Now, not just any old number. These are decimals. Okay. In both cases, you can have decimals. Now, rational numbers, they can be whole numbers, they can be integers because we can just put a whole number or an integer over one and it looks like a fraction. Okay. Now, when it comes to the decimal format of rational numbers, these are terminating decimals. So terminating means it's a number that just ends. So like 4.25 is a terminating decimal. It just ends. There's nothing after that 5. Okay. We could also have repeating decimals. So these are decimals that repeat either a single number or a pattern of numbers. So like 0.33333 and continue that 3, that would be a repeating decimal. 0.121212, keep that pattern going. That would be a repeating decimal. Now, when it comes to those irrational decimals, these are decimals that never terminate, never repeat. Okay? So there are special numbers, irrational numbers that never they're decimals, but they never terminate, they never repeat. So think like the square root of 2 or pi. Those would be irrational numbers, okay? So when it comes to writing a decimal as a fraction, we're dealing with very specifically rational numbers, okay? So these are the decimals that either terminate or repeat. So we can convert those to fractions, okay? So what we have to do is determine the place value of the last digit, okay? So figure out whatever your last digit is and determine its place value because this power of 10 becomes the denominator of our fraction. Because remember, we've noticed there's this really cool connection between the place value and the number of decimal places and the number of zeros in the power of 10 that kind of represents that place value. Okay, so we need to make note of that. Place the decimal number over the power of 10 and then reduce. So the hardest part here is really just reducing your fraction. And then if you have a whole number, we write that number first and then just convert the decimal part to a fraction. Okay, and so I do have one example where there's a whole number. So let's go ahead and look at example 4. So example 4 says convert each decimal to a simplified fraction. Okay, so I first have 0.75, or as we officially know, we have 75 hundredths. Okay, so we do have two decimal places. Two decimal places coincides with the power of 10 that has two zeros, so 100. So this digit right here, this 5, is in the hundredths place. Okay, so what we would do is we would write the denominator as 100, and then we would just put whatever our decimal is over 100. You don't put the decimal, you write it as a whole number. So instead of putting 0.75 over 100, we just put 75 over 100. And then we would want to reduce this, okay? So I happen to know that 75 and 100 are both divisible by 25. So I'm going to divide top and bottom by 25. 75 divided by 25 is 3. 100 divided by 25 is 4. So 0.75 is equivalent to 3/4. Okay? Now we can do the same thing for part B. We have negative 0.036, or officially we would say we have negative 36 thousandths. Okay? So let's count the decimal places. We have 1, 2, 3 decimal places. So 3 decimal places coincides with the power of 10 that has 3 zeros, so that would be 1,000. So this 6 right here is in the thousandths place, okay? So when we write this as a fraction, we're first going to make note that this decimal is negative, therefore its fraction equivalent has to be negative. And then we've got a denominator of 1,000, okay? So I need to put whatever my decimal portion of this number is over 1,000. But remember, we're not going to put 0.036. We're just going to treat whatever the decimal is as if it's a whole number. So I'm going to put 36 over 1,000. And then I want to reduce these. Okay. Now I happen to know that 36 and 1,000 are at least divisible by 2. They're both even numbers. Okay. So they're divisible by more than 2, but for now we're just going to practice. So they're both at least divisible by 2, so I'm going to divide them both by 2. So I get negative, well, 36 divided by 2 is 18, and 1,000 divided by 2 is 500. Well, 18 and 500 are both even again, so they're at least divisible by 2 again. So that gives me negative 9 over 250. So the only factors of 9 would be 9 and 3, and neither of those are going to go into 250 evenly. So we get negative 9 over 250. And then finally, we have 57.8, or as we would formally say, 57 and 8 tenths, okay? So in this case, when we write this out as a decimal or as a fraction, we want to start by writing this really as a mixed number is what this is going to be. So we're going to start with the 57, and then the 8 tenths we can write as, well, quite literally 8 tenths. So let's think about that. We have one decimal place. One decimal place coincides with a power of 10 that has one zero. So our denominator here would be 10. And then we want to put 8 over top of that. And then we just want to reduce 8 tenths. So 8 and 10 are divisible by 2. So I get 57 and 4/5. And there you have it. So that's really all there is to it when it comes to writing decimals as fractions. The hardest part is truthfully just the reducing. Okay? Whoops.